Hello and welcome to a very quick guide to basic human brain anatomy. By the end of this short video, you will not be able to perform neurosurgery, I'm sorry to say, but you will be able to impress your friends with terms like hippocampus and cerebral cortex, and you'll know an interesting fact about tree shrews. Let's begin. Here is a human brain viewed from the top. The first thing visible are the folds of tissue called the cerebrum or the cerebral cortex, or just plain cortex if you're in a hurry. When we think brain, most of us picture this. The cerebral cortex in general is in charge of higher functions like thinking, consciousness, etc. Despite what many people think, humans don't have the biggest brains in the animal kingdom. Not in terms of volume. Elephants and whales, for example, have us beat there, duh. Nor in terms of brain to body size ratio, where ants and tree shrews are the champs. But what us humans do have going for us, along with dolphins, is the most cortical folding of all animal brains. This folding creates a lot more surface area and thus more room for neurons, which we'll chat about in a moment. In fact, each half of our brain when unfolded into a flat sheet is almost 1.5 feet square. That's why the cortex has all those ridges and folds, because it has to be scrunched up to fit into our skulls. By the way, the crevices are called sulci and the peaks are called gyri, both words that are kind of fun to say and may win you a bar bet someday. The cortex is the youngest part of the brain, evolutionarily speaking, and is made up of zillions of nerve cells called neurons. Human brains have way more neurons than any other animal, so that's something to be proud of. The outermost layer of the cerebral cortex is called gray matter. Gray matter contains the cell bodies of the neurons and their little branch-like projections called dendrites, which carry signals to the neuron cells like antennae on a radio. The inner cortex is called white matter. There's a lot more white matter than gray matter in the brain. White matter is made up of nerve fibers called axons that, along with other connecting stuff like glial cells, carry signals from the neurons to other parts of the body. One way to think of it is that axons talk and dendrites listen. The brain is divided into left and right hemispheres, which are basically mirror images of each other. Both hemispheres are broken up into 4 lobes. Each lobe is in charge of distinct brain processes, however you say that. The frontal lobe is used in decision-making, problem-solving, and planning. The parietal lobe is in charge of taking received data from our senses and integrating it all. The occipital lobe deals with the receiving and processing of visual information. And the temporal lobe is important in things like memory, language, emotion, and hearing. If we look under the lobes, we find the oldest parts of the brain. These include the brainstem, which is made up of the midbrain, pons, and medulla. For our purposes, we can think of the whole kit and caboodle as working together to regulate stuff like heartbeat, breathing, blood pressure, level of consciousness, etc. I don't know about you, but I for one am glad I don't have to regulate my heartbeat consciously. I can't even remember to floss on a regular basis. The cerebellum is sometimes called the little brain and is associated with regulation and coordination of movement, posture, and balance. From an evolutionary point of view, the cerebellum is a much older part of the brain than the cortex. Even deeper inside the brain is a group of structures called the limbic system, which is also quite old. The limbic system is made up of the thalamus, the hypothalamus, the amygdala, and the hippocampus. The hippocampus is important in memory and learning. It is where short-term memory is converted to more permanent memory, and it also helps keep track of spatial relationships in the world around us. You can thank your hippocampus every time you avoid banging your head against a doorway, for example. The hypothalamus is involved in functions including emotion, thirst, hunger, and homeostasis, which basically means the steady balance of stuff like temperature, water, salts, proteins, etc. in the body. Its regulatory functions are sometimes described as the 4 F's: fighting, fleeing, feeding, and The amygdala is involved in memory, emotion, and fear responses. And the thalamus, which is like a central switchboard or gateway. It contains lots of nuclei and relays connections to the cortex between neurons in the cortex. Thank you for watching and/or listening to this presentation using your occipital/temporal lobes. This has been a very basic rundown of the parts of our brain, and for what it lacks in depth and detail, you gotta admit, it makes up for in price. See you later.